Hi, everyone. This is Dan, and we're back with Squadron Supreme and Watchmen, issue number 3. So let's just jump into this. These kind of end up being long videos just because I'm covering two books here at the same time. Let's jump over to Watchmen right here. And issue 3 is kind of interesting in that we have basically, again, just amazing writing by Alan Moore, great art by Dave Gibbons, but kind of a really weird structure or story or plot flow for this whole thing. This thing really reads more like a TV drama. And again, I know people say, oh, you shouldn't compare Watchmen to like television or movies, but it really does feel to me much more like a modern TV drama than it does like a comic book. At least that's my view, especially reading issue 3 right here. And again, you have so the text right here in the rolled paper word blocks right here is essentially the story that this character here is reading. And again, Alan Moore kind of plays with this newsstand guy and the kid throughout this issue. So the kid's reading a pirate story in a comic book, and the newsstand guy is basically a caricature of a lot of different, I would say like political thoughts or sort of brash viewpoints. Really almost like an American caricature. At least it feels that way. I think the Brits tend to like to simplify us a lot, sometimes validly so. And throughout this, he's kind of basically talking about, the sort of brash viewpoint of, oh, we should just nuke all the Russians, etc. And this character is just minding his own business, reading a rather well-written story about pirates. I'm actually not sure if this is like a reference for something else or if Alan Moore just came up and wrote this pirate story in the middle of fucking Watchmen. But I wouldn't be surprised if he did, as Alan Moore, he has a varied taste in terms, vast knowledge, I should say, of literature, and it flows and shows into his writing right here. So as this guy kind of rants and raves, and we, the reader, are sort of left to wonder what the hell's going on here. And then this story kind of gets played out of this dude basically abandoned in the ocean, waiting for pirates to kill him and whatnot. Here comes Rorschach in the usual look right here. And here, Dave Gibbons makes him look absolutely terrifying as the crazy guy right here. You also get a funny joke where he asks for the paper, and the newspaper guy tells him, "Oh, do you think the world's going to end today?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, definitely." Oh, by the way, have my paper ready tomorrow. Which he's sort of like, what? And then we jump into the actual plot of Watchmen right here. That was kind of like the build-up, and then basically Alan Moore kind of, for lack of a better word, slightly stroking himself in the opening issue right here. And we get to the main purpose of issue 3, which is really about Dr. Manhattan. And here we get a rather freaky scene here where the Silent Spectre is basically asleep, playing sort of pillow talk with Dr. Manhattan, as these two are, I don't know, they're necessarily married or just together. And then she finds out he's kind of doing some weird dual shit right here. And she runs off to go get a cigarette, and finds out that he's also copied over here working at the same time. So he was technically working while he was sleeping with her at the same time, which is the sort of implication of these panels right here. And I forgot to mention here the 9-panel structure that is just all over the place in Watchmen and gets used like crazy in modern comics. And I feel it's done pretty well in Watchmen. And I think at the time that it came out, it was a pretty interesting, I would say, storytelling style. And you could definitely tell that this was intentional by Alan Moore to have this kind of structure and layout. I don't know if I honestly like it much, though. And again, this may be me. I happen to, again, I'm not going to lie, I have a bias towards Marvel, and I love the dynamic layouts that Marvel has always kind of had more than what is going on in this particular comic. And to be fair, again, this isn't like something that was only Americans, right? Like there was absolutely outstanding dynamic layouts in 2000 AD, especially in Judge Dredd, which I will be returning to soon. But yeah, she ends up getting freaked out that basically he was sleeping with her while he was working at the same time. Basically kind of revealing his inhumanity, right? Like the sleeping with her is just sort of a duty that he has to do. It's not something that he actually cares that much, which is kind of the point of this is showing the faltering humanity of Dr. Manhattan. You know, he's become so desensitized as this sort of omnipotent being, right? So she ends up running out, and while this is going on, you get the other subplot, which is his former lover, Mrs. Slater, who was sort of peripherally introduced in the previous issue when they had a flashback, who is now basically dying from cancer and has decided to do a tell-all about how awful Dr. Manhattan is. Meanwhile, Silent Spectre Laurie walks over to the Night Owl's place, Dan Deirdre, I forget that's his name. And they end up kind of conversing, similar to issue 1. He offers her some coffee, notices he's out of sugar because Rorschach basically checked all of his fucking food. And the two of them kind of vent as they talk about, as she complains about her issues with Dr. Manhattan as she has left him, etc. It's very much just drama is all this is. It's really like almost TV time sort of drama, a little bit more on the mature side, right? But not a lot of action in this issue, which is okay. I mean, the writing is good, and the art, especially the total quality of Dave Gibbons' art here is so good that you don't necessarily mind as you're going through it. And the only issue I really had going through this issue was the whole newsstand person with the kid reading the pirate story. That felt like almost like a distraction, and honestly almost, I would say, indulgent of Alan Moore. I felt like it didn't really have any purpose. He just kind of wanted to put it in there for the purpose of putting it in there. You know, but maybe there's like some deeper meaning for readers out there who are into that kind of stuff. Just, for me, it kind of slipped past me, and honestly, I don't really care. It just felt like pages I had to read to get through to get to what I really care about, which is this. So Dr. Manhattan goes on to interview television, and meanwhile, Night Owl and Silent Spectre get accosted by some people, this is Night Owl on his way to go visit his the original Night Owl to kind of reminisce and whatnot. So you get the action here where they just kick the shit out of a bunch of people. And it's okay. There's some cool stuff right here. I think the first action panels aren't that great, though. I like this one right here where Silent Spectre just grabs this dude's balls and just practically rips him off. Meanwhile, the TV interview with Dr. Manhattan is going south real fast as basically a very aggressive reporter starts asking him questions about all these people that he's been associated with that are now either have died or are dying of a terminal cancer. Basically suggesting that Dr. Manhattan is radioactive or toxic, and now his personal relationships with people are now literally toxic. You know, so that issue goes on, and he ends up blowing up and transporting everybody out. And then all the other heroes find out later what happened, and Dr. Manhattan ends up having to basically leave Earth and go to Mars. You got some pretty nice. This is like great. Again, I don't understand. I guess having read through this, like I understand the like of comic books that Alan Moore has, but I cannot help but look at these and think more of a storyboard for a TV show. And that's kind of, I mean, if you take a look at this, right? Like, look at this, walking through. Look at the scene, camera pans, all this other stuff, right? It's really, like, at least to me, I don't feel this is especially this issue, is very comic booky at all. I mean, honestly, if you had the special effects, this would be kind of ideal to adapt as like an HBO miniseries and stuff. Again, that's just my opinion, especially, and I think it becomes even more apparent when I go and I turn over to Squadron Supreme and show the panel layout there. The panel layout there is absolutely not story reporting at all. So anyway, we go back to the newsstand and everything, and everyone ends up finding out that Dr. Manhattan has left America. And, he ends up, the newsstand guy actually jokes to Rorschach, it's like, so did the world end not yesterday? And he said, are you sure it didn't end? As he walks off, there's kind of the joke here, as Dr. Manhattan is basically a deterrent. He's such a powerful superhero that the Russians aren't going to try anything because, he is so powerful that he would just annihilate them, right? And you see the U.S. Army kind of going through their place, and, she's kind of in trouble as Dr. Manhattan has left, and this was kind of the reason why they even kept her around, essentially. And you get Rorschach waking up Night Owl and kind of explain to him, like, oh, so are you sure people aren't going after superheroes? Which is kind of funny because this, like, it didn't really have anything to do with somebody going out and murdering. It was more like Dr. Manhattan himself, along with his relationship, slowly deteriorating and falling apart. Which kind of, it goes to the point that Rorschach, really, at least to me, I don't find him a very relatable or likable character. I kind of fall in line with I would say, Steve Ditko's assessment of the character, which really this character is basically a rip of Mr. A, which is from Steve Ditko, which is Rorschach is basically insane and paranoid. And all the other sort of right-wingism, is just more of, like, I would say, attributed to Alan Moore's excellent writing. But as far as, like, his actions, if you pay attention to him, he's really a terrible human being. I also find it really funny that here the newspaper guy suddenly turns an about face when he gets the next day's news and Russia invades Afghanistan, and he runs off thinking the world's going to end and whatnot now because it's going to be a nuclear battle and all this other stuff. This is, to me, like, really telling. Like, this is like Alan Moore in a nutshell. Like, because, it's not like Russia didn't invade Afghanistan anyway around this same time. The world didn't end then. Hell, honestly, any country that invades Afghanistan is, at this point, is really freaking stupid. We've kind of gone through, like, how many empires have invaded this, both the British, the Russians, and the Americans. They've all come out on the wrong end. But, whatever. The rest of it is just sort of like, big screen implication. Again, I can't help but feel like this is, like a movie or a mini series right here, as Dr. Manhattan walks through Mars, and you get Richard Nixon talking to all of his staff about the eventual destruction of the United States by nuclear war, right? And it's again, excellent writing and great art. I just found for this issue the plot's really slow. And it's just, there's a lot of excess fluff that even if it's good, I just find myself becoming very impatient. And I'm like remembering why I like to just read through Watchmen and not take it one issue at a time. Because you really do need the whole thing to kind of, at least for me, enjoy it. But that, again, that's just my opinion. For other people reading it, maybe you enjoy the extra stuff. It certainly is of great quality. So anyway, let's get to Squadron. So again, I've said this like already twice now, but I'll say it again. The obvious difference between Alan Moore's modern writing style and Squadron Supreme and Mark Gruenwald's classic Marvel style is just apparent every single video I do here. And it's going to be apparent here too. So you go back to the Squadron. Squadron, again, they're trying to make utopia on Earth. It's almost like a completely different lesson as far as like the implications of superheroes in the world, right? Than the one in Watchmen. Watchmen kind of grounds them and makes them very human and flawed and really dirty and grim. Whereas in Squadron Supreme, they are flawed, but they're still kind of trying to use their powers to create an ideal sort of universe, right? Sort of the power fantasy. taken to its ultimate extent philosophically in Squadron Supreme. So here you have Power Princess, and she's basically doing a commercial here. Pretty cool how you have the channel screens and everything right here. But he's using, Mark Gruenwald is using it correctly, because this actually is a commercial or a TV thing. And she's going up basically trying to, this is basically propaganda. She's trying to explain the Squadron Supreme's reasonings for why they are now basically enacting very aggressive gun control in the United States, or really in the world as well too. And it's pretty interesting. Now, to be fair, this is kind of the point of this is very, I would say, American, because for most of the world they actually don't have gun rights. So this first opener right here really only makes sense to Americans. Because a lot of this, the philosophical arguments are arguments that I would say culturally make sense to us, and we hold it very dear and near to our heart. But for people outside of the United States, it might not make a whole lot of sense, and they might end up actually agreeing with Power Princess in this lineup here, which is fine. It's kind of meant to be a little bit philosophical, this entire miniseries, right? So while she's doing this commercial, Dr. Spectrum decides to play a little trick by ripping her clothes off. And she ends up ripping his cape off to cover herself and getting a little pissed and giving him some warning about his lack of responsibility. Meanwhile, you get a really interesting conversation between the President of the United States and Power Princess, where, you know, basically she admits that the whole gun control thing, you know, really isn't designed to actually stop killing people, even though she's advertising as such. It's really a means to an end, in that she's trying to basically slow down the killing, because the reality is even she admits that people kill and not guns, which the reality is that is 100% true. You know, you can kill, people will kill people without guns. It's just the amount of efficiency and how many people could potentially be killed is really what's occurring here. But this is just part one of her plan to, you know, exterminate crime and all this other stuff. Really idealism right here, but it's more along the lines of, you know, obtaining more and more power over people is what's going on. Meanwhile, she flies back to the squadron's headquarters. They have a big meeting, and they kind of notice that Nuke hasn't been around for a while now. They're kind of wondering what happened to Nuke. We all know what happened to Nuke. He got pissed off at Tom Thumb in the last issue when Tom Thumb failed to save his parents from cancer, and he's kind of blasted off to kind of do his own thing. So Power Princess enacts a little bit of revenge on Dr. Spectrum by basically volunteering him to go find Nuke. And they both kind of, they both kind of have a play right here. And Dr. Spectrum, this whole issue really is about Dr. Spectrum. And he starts off in this issue being sort of, being somewhat brash, kind of a dick, and very, as Power Princess notes, very irresponsible as a superhero, right? And people have to remember that Squadron Supreme came out a year before Watchmen. So this technically predates it and came out first in terms of the concepts that are presented here. And he ends up flying over to Motor City, basically Detroit in this world, right? And to go and try and find Nuke. Meanwhile, Whizzer, Arcana, and Aqua, I forget his name. What is he? Amphibian, my bad. He's basically the Aquaman, but he's amphibian. They end up having to go and stop a bunch of rioters in Texas who are basically raiding a gun store, right? And Dr. Spectrum, when he goes to visit the hospital to basically find Nuke's parents, he finds out that Nuke's parents have passed away recently. So he's now kind of realizing, like, oh shit, he's probably in mourning. We go back to the scene where... and again, this is the Marvel thing. Notice how much has happened, like so much action and so much stuff has occurred within just these kind of issues. This is sort of the classic American style. And it does mean, the pacing is very quick, and it can be difficult for the writing to follow. Like, I will say this, the writing in this issue, just from a pure writing perspective, is not up to snuff with what Alan Moore does in Watchmen. It just isn't. And if you read it, you'll see it isn't. But what is up to snuff is the overall plot and the overall, basically the moral and the lesson of the story. The point of each issue is, to me, far more interesting than more of like the minor dialogue between characters, right? The dialogue in Watchmen is much more quotable and much more likable, but the overall message and the overall story and plot I just find to be just gross and just ugly. Just me. Whereas the message in Squadron Supreme, every issue, is fantastic right here. So they go off and they end up disarming all these people who are raiding a gun factory. And Arcana kind of drags another person to the wall here and interrogates him like, hey, why are you doing this? And what occurs is probably the most to the point explanation of why people desire, especially when in the eyes of a ever growing, encroaching, and powerful central force controlling them, the desire to have armaments or arms to protect themselves right here. And he's very simple. He says like, look, you got superpowers, but what do we have? We're just normal, right? So the best we can do is to get guns and firearms, and you take them away from us, and we have no means of protecting ourselves from you or the federal government that you now basically are a part of, right? And it's a argument that I will admit for people internationally, this might be difficult to understand. And I think a lot of it, especially for those of you who are in more of, say, the peaceful countries, like, say, Western Europe and whatnot, where, you just think, well, everything's going to be okay because, people wouldn't do that and we don't need guns to do all this other stuff. I get it. If you're in Western Europe, then, you're not into the whole gun culture and the other stuff. All of this can seem rather difficult to understand. But for those of us in America, this is extremely important. It's why our Bill of Rights has the right to bear arms as the Second Amendment. And again, I'm not going to get too politically into it. I'm just really stating, sort of why this comic really, if I had to really kind of give it some criticism, it's really coming from a very American point of view. And I think if you are from a foreign country, you might be a little confused by this issue, or a little, I would say maybe in disagreement of this issue. But for me, it's actually really, really good summary of why, at least in my country, we find this right to be so important. You have the right to, to free speech, and you also have the right to protect yourself to maintain that free speech, right? So anyway, they end up basically destroying all these guns and arresting all these people. Meanwhile, Dr. Spectrum is able to kind of track down Nuke, find his brother and whatnot. And he finds out that Nuke has basically lost his mind. He's gone absolutely bonkers. And he ends up just blowing up a bunch of stuff and basically telling him that I'm going to kill Tom Thumb for failing my parents, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. And so Spectrum ends up having to fly out and kind of complaining the entire time because he's kind of come across as like a sort of irresponsible playboy since the very first issue of this miniseries. And now here he is really having to truly be a hero this time around. Not just any hero, but a hero that now has to stop another hero, right? Remember, Nuke is a part of the Squadron Supreme. And so he tries to sort of restrain him, right? So he puts him in a bubble, and Nuke ends up just blowing up that bubble, and they end up fighting, and he ends up, really unleashing his radioactive nuclear powers. So Spectrum ends up having to make a massive bubble, basically going full Green Lantern right here, and making it as thick as possible while Nuke basically, just ignites, and tries to break out. What he ends up doing is burning all of the oxygen within that bubble. And when, when Spectrum finally is able to sort of release him because he stops basically burning up, he finds out that Nuke has basically died from suffocation. And it's the art here by Bob Hall is fantastic. I will say the writing, the dialogue by Mark Gruenwald, at least in my opinion, I feel deserves a little bit more work. Again, we can't do anything about it. Mark Gruenwald's long passed away, but just me looking, I felt like it was a little weak on the dialogue side here. Here you had a comrade, a member of the Squadron Supreme passing away. And it just it just the words here kind of fall a little flat, but nevertheless, you can see in the art here the tragedy of what's just happened right here. So he ends up having to bring him back to the squadron, and he tells the squadron that he found him and that he had to kill him. Now, his Dr. Spectrum ends up, turning around from being sort of an immature prick to coming back and basically fessing up to what occurred right here. And he ends up a great turnaround here with Princess Power basically embracing him and telling him it's all right, we understand what happened. And then you get the really sad part of him having to fly back and explain to his brother that he had to kill his older brother to stop him from killing another. And the kid ends up forgiving him and whatnot, but it's a very sad issue, and basically a sign of like the responsibility of superheroes, right? To at least in this world, in order for them to create paradise, they have to hold themselves to a standard so high that you can see here with Nuke and even with Spectrum that they really can't hold that standard, and things start to basically slowly fall apart here. Here you have the death of one squadron member, but as we get further into the series, it gets steadily worse and worse. So now that's the issue. We get to issue 4 after that, and overall, what do I think? So again, same as like last issue, I enjoyed reading Squadron Supreme's issue more than I enjoyed Watchmen. Again, don't for those of you who are Watchmen fans, don't mean this as me condemning Watchmen. Absolutely not. This is excellent, and the issue here is very, very good. It's just I have never done this before where I've read Watchmen one issue at a time. I've always read it just straight through, and now having going issue by issue, it's at least to me, I know the issues that I'm going to enjoy a lot in this, but right now I'm just finding issue by issue Squadron to be a lot more enjoyable to sit down and read an issue, whereas Watchmen, I'm finding myself becoming impatient, and to be fair, that's just my preference and what I like in a story, and we'll see as we go further into this, and at least I know from my memory, I think it's going to flip as we get further down the line. But we'll say this, art, overall quality of art is, I would say Dave Gibbons is higher quality than Bob Hall. But Bob Hall has some great panels in here, especially when it comes to the dynamicism of his art. I think I like a little more than Dave Gibbons. Dave Gibbons, I think, is just higher end quality overall. And then writing wise, Alan Moore, obviously just a better writer, just being honest, than Mark Gruenwald, but plot and story wise, I think Mark Gruenwald has a much better, especially issue to issue, plotting and story than Alan Moore's Watchmen. Just my view, but go ahead and read it yourself and find out. I totally recommend both of these. Anyway, that's the video, guys. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. If you got any comments on Watchmen number 3 or Squadron Supreme number 3, leave it down below, and I will see you next time.